We're talking about difficult music today. Hey, I'm Isaac Schanno Johnson. If you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff. Music composition, music production. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. So, difficult music. I honestly think that it's kind of easy to write difficult music, and sometimes as a musician that's writing for other people, especially if they're good and you have a performance, sometimes you kind of get in this trap of I want to write difficult music because it's difficult. So you're writing difficult music for the sake of the music being difficult, rather than thinking, what's the point of this part of the music? Is it necessary that I write it this specific way? So first thing, I want to start off by talking about a whole lot of ways that we can make the music difficult, because I think it's useful both to know in terms of things to avoid, but also to know in terms of things that you can write if you have a player that is good enough. So the first way that you can make something difficult is just by writing a lot of really fast notes. Fast music tends to be pretty difficult, especially if it's not written specifically for that instrument and it is just thought of as a bunch of fast stuff. It might be really awkward to play, and it's just an easy way to make something really difficult kind of easily without having to put much thought into writing it. I think the first thing you want to avoid is just writing a bunch of fast stuff. To write fast stuff, probably not the most musical thing to do, unless there is a specific reason why you want it to be that fast and why you want it to be those specific notes. If you know something about playing the instrument, like the mechanics of it, how it works, how you place your fingers, all of that stuff, how you change the notes and the keys and whatever, if you know something about that, then just make something really strange and awkward for the instrument. Like really, really big jumps on piano is something that's going to be difficult, especially if it's one hand and fairly quick. That's something that's going to be difficult simply because you're jumping on piano and you have to move your hand a far distance. It's going to be hard to be accurate and quick at doing it. On guitar, same thing. Really big jumps from the really low notes to really high notes is going to be something that's difficult. Something that I like to remember is that it's a lot easier to write difficult music than it is to play difficult music. I don't mean that as a knock on people that have written difficult music, but a lot of the time, difficult music that you'll find in standard repertoire for different instruments is stuff that somebody has previously played, or they wrote it for themselves to play, or they wrote it for a specific player who they know could play it. So just remember that that's kind of how a lot of difficult music came about. Was it was written for some of the best players, and those people could definitely play it, rather than it just being written sort of abstractly as a piece of music and then here, play this, right? It was written for the specific player because that specific player was able to do that specific thing. I think being intentional with what you write in your music is really important as a musician and somebody that's trying to express some idea in a piece of music. I don't mean that it has to be, every single note has to be really thought out and say, and you have to ask yourself, do I really want this note? Is B flat really the note here? But what I mean is, when you're writing a piece of music, make sure that you are choosing what you're putting in because that's what you want to put in it, right? Be intentional about it rather than just playing a whole bunch of random stuff and then being like, yep, okay, that's it. But if you want it to sound like a bunch of random stuff, right? If the intention, yeah, there we go. If the intention is to sound like a bunch of random stuff, then yeah, play a bunch of random stuff. But think about, what effect do you want to communicate? What feeling do you want to communicate? What do you want to do in the piece of music? And then do that. And if your goal is to improvise freely and feel whatever you're feeling in the moment and express that through the instrument, sort of like you're freely improvising, then that's your intention. But the intention of what you're doing is there. I think sometimes when you either start to write music, or even if you've been writing music for a while, you kind of get stuck in certain patterns of writing where you're not sort of thinking about what type of music you want to write. You're sort of just mechanically going about the motions of writing music, and then you end up writing a whole lot of stuff that you don't like because you weren't actually thinking about what you were doing. So then think about what you're doing. That'll help a lot, because then you get out of those sort of, even if you are doing the same sort of like patterns, you start with the melody, then you write chords, and then you write a drum beat or whatever. Even if you're starting with that same sort of order of writing stuff, you're thinking more intentionally, is this the drum beat I want? Is this the chords I want? How could I change these chords to create the feeling that I want, right? You're sort of deciding ahead of time what you're going to do, and then you're trying to match that. Now, it depends what your intention is, but doing it intentionally, I think, creates a lot of better music than if you just sort of throw some stuff at the wall. If you're writing something that's hard and the players are going to have a hard time playing it, make sure that it is 100% necessary to communicate what you're trying to communicate in that piece of music. Because if it's not, it's kind of just going to be a pain to play, and a pain to rehearse, and a pain to record, and a pain to perform for everyone, and no one's going to really enjoy it. But if you write something that's, mildly difficult, where maybe they have to practice it or look at it a couple times to make sure they really, really got it, then that's fine. I'm talking about music that's so difficult that, they need to spend an extra week practicing it specifically, rather than, just spending a couple days to rehearse or whatever. Being that I went to Berklee College of Music and I studied composition and film scoring, I saw a lot of students that were in the program that wrote difficult music for the ensembles because they knew they were getting good players. So they wrote a lot of hard stuff. And I think a lot of it was unnecessarily hard and stuff that the players couldn't play like within the first 3 takes sometimes. Not that difficult, honestly. It was stuff they could get after, 10 takes. Sometimes it would be sort of unnecessarily difficult to play for the players, where they would either get a little nervous about it, a little stressed out, or we wouldn't get as good of a take as it could have been. But I saw a lot of sort of the mentality of, I'm going to write something difficult because it's difficult, right? I want to write difficult music because it's cool to have difficult music, to give someone a piece that they have to practice. And I mean, sure, but I think at the end of the day, especially if you have a performance or a recording session, what matters is the quality of that performance or recording session, not how much they have to practice before it, right? If they come in and they just absolutely butcher the performance, then not sure that it was really worth it to write something that was that difficult because the performance didn't turn out so well. I also think that it caused a lot of problems in rehearsals when I saw students doing this, because they wanted their music to be difficult and be this one thing, and they wanted it to be, hard for the players to play. But it didn't really matter because the players just got frustrated and the performance didn't sound good. So if there's something that you're writing that is really difficult to play, and someone that plays the instrument well, and they're like, yeah, this is going to be pretty hard for, professional players to play, or this is going to be pretty hard for anyone but, the violin section of the LA Philharmonic to play well. See if it's really necessary. Often I think the effects that you get from really fast playing, or things that are often really difficult, can be simplified to get basically the same effect without making it that extra level of difficult to play. So you're not exactly getting the exact same notes and rhythms that you might write if you wrote the really difficult version, but you're getting something that's close enough where the effect that you're trying to achieve in the music is the same, right? So really fast runs, for example, maybe you simplify them so that they're doubling each note twice. So each note is hit twice, and then you slow down the run or something, right? Whatever it is. Or maybe you have this really awkward scale that the players might not be familiar with, and you change it to a slightly more common scale so that that shape or those shapes will be under their fingers more easily. Something like that, right? If it's an awkward shape on the piano, maybe you move around a few of the notes so that it's slightly less awkward, and then the player can play it. That's a personal one of mine. I wrote a piece of music for one of my friends, and I wrote this really fast thing in the right hand, and I had this left hand bass line, and he told me he played it through in a practice room, and then he like texted me. He was like, yeah, give me like half a year and I can play this at the speed that you want with the left hand. But right now with the recording this Friday, I can't play it that fast. I can do one or the other, the bass line or the right hand. So he was really nice about it, but he split the right hand in between his fingers, and then he could play it well because it was this really awkward shape on piano. And with that awkward shape, he wasn't able to play it very quickly. I think it was 30-second notes or something. It was really fast, but he couldn't play that with a left hand part at the correct speed. So he was like, you gotta choose. And yeah, I was like, the effect I want is this one part. Screw the rest of it. I don't really need it. And I think it's useful to remember, if you're writing a piece of music that you know the players, especially if you know the players, write something that they will be able to play well. Write for the players, those specific people that you know are going to play it. If you're just writing a piece of music that you don't know who's going to perform it, or you're just writing it for the fun of writing it, sure, you can put in something really difficult, but remember that you're going to need the best players to be able to play it. And if you have access to those players, congrats. That's dope, but not everyone is going to have access to those players, and I don't think it's realistic to write music that can exclusively be played well by, the New York Philharmonic. I realize they're going to play everything well, but if you give it to a slightly less than professional orchestra, let's say a college symphony orchestra, and they're unable to play it after the number of times they have to rehearse, yeah, then maybe simplify it so that those players can play it well and make your piece sound good. Because I think something to remember is that people are going to hear the end product. That's the end result, the performance, the recording, the show, whatever it is. They're going to hear the end version of it, not the thing that's in your head. They're going to hear the actual end version that is created, whether that's a poorly performed recording or a poor performance. That's what they're going to hear, rather than the version of it that the LA Philharmonic could play that's in your head. If it's not the LA Philharmonic, no one's going to care what it sounds like with the LA Philharmonic playing. It's I think it's just something to remember when you're writing music, because sometimes you want to write these really difficult things. I definitely do, where I'm like, oh, this would be so cool. And then I realize who's playing it, and I'm like, no, I want them to be able to record it in an hour and get it back to me, this week or something. I'm not going to write something that's that ridiculous, right? Or I'm writing this for a high school orchestra. I can't write something that's that hard, because I know they're not going to sound good, and it's just going to stress them out because they'll know that they don't sound good. So I think it's just a mentality that's worth remembering as you're writing, because you want your music to sound good, and you also want it to be impressive sometimes, but the main thing is remember that the end product, the end performance is what matters. If that's good, the piece of music is going to sound good. So that's it for this video. Hope you found it useful. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something about music. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.